Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trucking Tower podcast. I'm very excited to be joined today by Fred Fakkema, who is the Vice President of Safety and Compliance at Zonar Systems and also Chairman of the ATA Law Enforcement Advisory Board. How are you doing today, Fred?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. First of all, I want to thank you for your military service and also for your public service as a police officer.
Thank you for that. And thanks for having me today. It's an honor to join you, and I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, I have as well. Today we're going to be talking about the ATA Law Enforcement Advisory Board. What is the mission? What's happening in the field and more. But to kick things off, I'd like to thank our sponsor, CyberFuels. If you're looking to save anywhere from 26 to 95 cents per gallon of fuel, reduce emissions, and reduce maintenance, please be sure to click on the link below. So to give our audience a little background about you, Fred, can you tell us about your prior work in the law enforcement area?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, law enforcement wasn't just a job to apply for. It really was a calling. It was something I wanted to do since I was a boy. My mom likes to tell the story when I was about 6 years old, telling her I was going to be a state trooper, not a city police officer, not a deputy, but a state trooper. It's kind of always been that calling. And I joined the Army when I was 18 and served 3 years in the 82nd Airborne Division. After I left the Army, I joined the Washington State Patrol and really started living that boyhood dream that I had. So helping people and serving and protecting, that was kind of the time of my life. It's where I spent 25 years of my career. I started in traffic law enforcement after graduating from the academy. I then worked my way up through the ranks, eventually becoming a captain. One of the positions I had was overseeing the commercial vehicle division for the state of Washington. It's that post where working on the highway safety and alongside commercial vehicle drivers on a daily basis is kind of where it really led me to the trucking industry and where I am today with Zonar Systems and now the ATA's Law Enforcement Advisory Board.
Well, thank you so much for all of that service. That's awesome and amazing. My dad was an Army veteran, and he was also a mentor to me, of course, personally and in business as well. So I really appreciate our military and our public service officers and really appreciate your work.
Yeah, I appreciate that. My son's currently serving, and so I'm proud of him as well. He's in Germany currently with the family. So, it runs deep.
Absolutely. Well, can you tell us a little bit about how did this advisory board and the role with ATA kind of come about?
Yeah, so the American Trucking Association stood up the board in 2021, and so we're still relatively new, and we're ending our third year of existence, and it's my second year as chair of the board. But the inception really came from the idea of opportunity. How can law enforcement community and the trucking industry better align resources to really achieve common goals? And that's really around highway safety. So when you think about it, there's no two other groups in this country that are better positioned to have an impact on that subject. You got troopers and truckers, their eyes and the ears of the nation's highway. No one else has a better presence than them. So why not bring those two groups together? And that lies this opportunity. How can we work better together and form those synergies? Improve safety outcomes for everybody using the road, really. And this group of ATA Law Enforcement Advisory Board set out to answer that very question. We brought together, it's really an impressive group of individuals, each whom have law enforcement experience and trucking experience together. And right now we have 38 members who combined for over 900 years of law enforcement experience across federal, state, and local agencies. And so you kind of bring this brain trust together to leverage our experience, our ideas, and contacts in law enforcement, really to advise industry leaders how best to work with the enforcement world. So I was thrilled to join the effort. I'm proud to play the leadership role on the board. For me personally, this is kind of the work of law enforcement and industry relations that I did with the patrol. So it's a kind of an extension of, those last 25 years. So it's a lot of fun for me. A lot of members on the board I know from my career in law enforcement. So it's kind of like a high school reunion sometimes when we get together and try to get stuff done. But, as a captain in commercial vehicle, I work closely with the Washington Trucking Association and partnered with them on a number of initiatives. One of the projects was called Step Up and Ride, where we actually put troopers in the truck to look for violators that were operating around the trucks. And that eventually led to the creation of a federal program called Ticket Aggressive Cars and Trucks, or TACT. That helped build awareness and educate passenger and commercial motor vehicle drivers about safe driving behaviors around one another. So those kind of opportunities is what the Law Enforcement Advisory Board is working on. Similar strategies, identifying opportunities for cooperation both ways for the industry and law enforcement, and really combine those resources to achieve those common goals.
Right. Yeah. And I've talked to a lot of drivers and fleet owners over the years. Aggressive cars really cause major safety problems on the road. I've heard it. I've seen videos. It is a problem for sure.
It does, and same with distracted driving, which leads to the aggressive driving. You know, with our trucks, you know, commercial vehicles, they outlaw phones, you know, inside the cab. Of course, they don't outlaw federally inside of a car. So we really need to kind of streamline that and kind of make it the same for both to really have an impact on that distracted and aggressive driving aspect. And it really increased during the COVID days as well.
Right. And I know another area that I've heard about seeing the trafficking, right? This is National Trafficking Prevention Month, I do believe. And, you know, it seems to me, first line, truck drivers and law enforcement kind of working together could make, you know, have tremendous impact. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, you know, the human trafficking is a multi-billion-dollar business that we really need to stomp out. You know, it is a priority for the Law Enforcement Advisory Board, and certainly it's a priority for Zonar as well. But with the industries we serve, truck drivers are uniquely positioned to, you know, really identify and help those victims being transported on routes or roads or in the parking areas or rest areas where they're at daily. You know, so what we did last fall was we launched our new partnership with Trucker Against Trafficking, or TAT is commonly what they're known as, is by releasing a free mobile app, an e-TAT app for in-cab tablets. And everybody knows in the industry that most trucks have a tablet because of ELD requirements and hours of service. And so this free app will teach drivers how to identify and safely help victims and encourage confidential reporting to the Human Trafficking Resource Center. You know, there's a stat that right at this moment, there's approximately 40 million human slaves around the world. And so we really need to join that fight and save lives and really make a difference in that.
Absolutely. Well, kudos for your company and your work in that area. I've been fortunate to travel to 9 countries during my career and do work in supply chain. And I've seen things, I've heard things, and it's a big problem. I mean, from everything I see and hear. So I'm so glad to hear that you guys are involved in that way. You know, in terms of being on the road and operating a fleet, what are some of the big challenges facing drivers and fleets today that you see?
You know, I was at ATA's annual management conference exhibition in San Diego in October, and there, the American Transportation Research Institute releases a study identifying the top issues facing both fleet and drivers. And they always do a big unveil there. And for your listeners who may not be familiar with ATRI, they're really a fantastic organization that produces top-notch research for the trucking industry. But,
right.
For fleets, their survey found, not unsurprisingly, that fuel costs was among the top issue for carriers, and I'm sure our sponsor already knows that. You know, so it's a big deal that everybody's watching. But following that was driver shortage and the challenge of finding qualified drivers. You know, and there's a lot being said about that. But for drivers, it was a lack of safe parking options, which really pinged high on the list. And in talking to drivers, and you probably have heard it as well, that complaint we hear often, and it happens to be one of the issues that our board is laser focused on to address.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about that in recent years, and even some demonstrating and protesting in Washington, you know, about that was one of the big issues for drivers themselves that they wanted to bring to light. And of course, ATA was heavily involved in that. So I loved the conversations going on and how can we help? What can we do to solve this problem? So it's very important. You know, in terms of the ATA Law Enforcement Advisory Board, what are like 2 or 3 of the top goals in overcoming challenges?
Well, it's truck parking is one of our focuses right now. We know that it's an issue of driver health and wellness. It's an issue for the supply chain. When drivers can't find safe parking in a timely manner, it wastes productivity. Drivers might miss a turn. We also know that it's a serious safety issue. It forces drivers really to park on shoulders. And if you drive down the freeway or the interstate, you see it, they're parked on entrances and exits, ramps, no fault of their own most of the time. They're beholden to the hours of service where drivers are forced really, and they're between a rock and a hard spot looking for a place to park. You know, you have over 300,000 parking areas, but you have over 3 million trucks that are operating. The numbers don't work. So it's dangerous for the motoring public. It's something troopers all know too well. It's something I've seen throughout my entire career. And we believe it's an important part of this debate. And for the Law Enforcement Advisory Board, it's an important voice in the story that needs to be heard. So what we did last year was our board sent a letter to all 50 state DOTs explaining that. We say, hey, this is a serious safety issue and it really needs to be addressed for the safety of everyone. It's not an industry need per se. It's not about the convenience for commercial drivers. It's really about protecting the lives of the motoring public. And the thing is there's money for it. So with the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law, there's discretionary grant programs in which the transportation secretary has said, he made it clear that he'll direct parking projects in this. Send money there. The US DOT just needs states to apply for those funds. And so we received a lot of feedback on those letters, and we're engaged with several state DOTs on the issue and helping them steer toward those resources through ATA and on how to apply for those funds. So that's one example, given our experience on the board and how we can bring a high degree of credibility and authoritarian voice, and a lot of intellectual capital to the discussion around one issue. But the other issue that I wanted to talk about too is one of our priorities is taking a hard look this coming year at the legalization of marijuana in states across the country. Mm-hmm. The trend is raising a lot of questions, and it's a complex set of challenges for sure. I mean, without a reliable road testing mechanism at roadside, you don't have a proven impairment standard when it comes to THC. So how can enforcement ensure that a motor vehicle operator, not just a truck driver, but anybody, is not under the influence of THC? So that's a challenge for the industry. It's marijuana is a drug that's not allowed if you're a truck driver. So both law enforcement and the industry have a very important voice in the debate. We have a valuable perspective as well as law enforcement. So we look for ways to participate in this debate. Again, our eyes are always on the goal of highway safety. So that's what it's about. And so those are 2 top issues that we're really focusing on. And we already mentioned human trafficking and aggressive and distracted driving as well.
Right. Absolutely. End goal, keep everybody as safe as we can. And there's definitely some issues with all of those areas that you've mentioned. What would you say are the best ways for people to connect with you or ATA to learn more?
For me, you can find me on Twitter at Zonar Compliance. Being the old guy, I had to learn how to utilize that, but
right.
we're pretty active on that. And then, of course, where we met on LinkedIn, people can find me on LinkedIn. But as far as ATA and the Law Enforcement Advisory Board, you can even look at applying and join the group if you're interested in have that experience at trucking.org/law enforcement. And interesting that we're talking today because we just went through all the applications for the board and just sent out invite emails on who we accepted to serve on the board today. So that you'll see a press release coming out probably next week talking about that as well. So we're excited about that. But ATA has a large social media presence across a number of channels, and the best way to find them is at trucking.org.
Right. Absolutely. It's the biggest association of trucking companies probably in the world, for sure, in America.
Right.
So yeah, very familiar and doing great things. So this is the last question I always ask of all my guests. What would you say as a final word of advice for our friends out there listening or watching today?
Find ways to get deeper involved in the things that really interest you. For friends in the industry, ATA is a great way to do that. There's also other organizations that you can join to really make a difference and be a part of. The ATA has great networking opportunities, a different number of platforms to speak in every facet of trucking. There's policy committee work. You can help shape federal law. You can be part of a professional development council, help elevate the industry's image. There's so many different things that you could do with ATA that they have to offer, but it's really about improving the success of our industry, changing the perception of the industry as well. That we're professional and we get things done, and without us, you're not going to have anything on the shelves. So everybody's concerned about the highway safety. So really, if you have that passion, look at that. For me, it's leading the Law Enforcement Advisory Board. And that's just one example of what we do and what I do personally. But without the support of Zonar and the efforts that we do in highway safety, that's one of our primary focuses, using technology to improve safety. I want to be here, so I appreciate their support as well.
Absolutely. The trucking industry is so important. Everything we have around us, it comes on a truck at some point, right? So it's vital to our economy. It's best that we keep everybody safe out there, truck drivers and passengers, all the motorists. And so I love the work that's being done. It's amazing. And I love being able to feature it on our show today. So thanks again for coming on with me, Fred. I really appreciate it.
Anytime. I really appreciate the opportunity and being able to talk about the board and get folks aware of the efforts that we're doing.
Absolutely. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Trucking Tower podcast. Thanks for watching or listening, everybody. We'll see you again. Take care.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.